All right, good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are so excited to be here with all of you tonight to celebrate Authentic Selves. It is a beautiful new photo essay book celebrating many, many different trans lives and trans families. We are here with some of the folks in the book. But first, I want to introduce Ben, who is going to talk about one of our partner organizations tonight, Transparent ATL.
I am here tonight representing Georgia. And we are a support group for parents, transgender and gender transitive kids. Trans or transitive child, we would love for you to join us. The website is transparentusa.org.
Thank you. And now I'm going to ask Taylor to tell us a little bit about Southern Fried Queer Pride.
Hello, my name is Taylor Alexander. Ooh, the acoustics in here. Okay. My pronouns are they, them, she, her. I am the executive director and one of the co-founders of Southern Fried Queer Pride, also known as SFQP. We are a queer and trans arts and community organization based here in Atlanta with roots all over the South. We are trans-led and founded. We center the narratives and stories of Southern LGBTQ folks, specifically those who are Black and brown. We just celebrated our 9th annual festival over in Little Five Points, and super happy to be here. And find us anywhere online at SFQP or southernfriedqueerpride.com. Yeah.
Thank you all. All right. So we always love getting to work with partner organizations, and Southern Fried Queer Pride and Transparent Atlanta are two organizations that do work that's very aligned with Charis's mission. Right now, Charis Circle hosts 4 trans support groups for people from basically, 2 years old to 80 years old, I think is our age range. And so at this time, we're really, really honored to get to celebrate y'all's stories, because it was a joy for me to get to read this book and to see the beauty of your families and your various expressions. So I wondered if we could start with Dahlia and go down the line, and just if you could introduce yourself and just say a little bit about, sort of maybe one thing that surprised you about participating in this book.
My name is Dahlia. I don't use any pronouns, so just my name. One of the big surprises when I went back and I was reading other people's stories was how many of us in our teen years maybe had thoughts of self-harm, which is just a manifestation of how intensely stressful it is for someone at that stage of life not to find a safe place to land or affirming people. And so I understand how some parents get really stressed out thinking that when their child starts clearly expressing their true gender identity, that their life is going to be unhappy or stressful, but it really is the environment that you're in. It is not the identity that is problematic, but it just made me sad for all of our younger selves that we had to go through that. But really, I was overjoyed that now we can be those adults and those representatives so that other kids can know you're not strange. This is a normal expression of humanity. Not everybody is cis. And there's going to be a point at which that's normalized and everybody gets that, but we're definitely not there yet.
Yes, thank you.
Hello. My name is Feroza Syed, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I think for me, kind of like what Dahlia was saying, is it was amazing to read the different backgrounds and experiences that everybody had, and quite a bit of those were traumatic, but to also see trans joy in a beautiful way, and the diversity in this book from, me being like a South Asian trans woman, seeing a trans South Asian man doctor, seeing Taylor, seeing people who work from every aspect of, every kind of different career path you could think of, every part of the country, every expression, and seeing how much beauty and joy. And, a lot of our stories did have a lot of similar traumas, but a lot of us, whether, those were resolved or not, just seeing how joyous these people were, you could see them popping off of the pages and the light like coming out of people's eyes. And I think that's what was really important to me, especially in the climate that we're in right now, is sometimes we don't, as we say in the community, don't give flowers to our friends or roses to people until they're gone. But to be able to see a different expression of transness, not just the sorrow and the pain and suicide, but people who are happy and successful and adjusted and have overcome all these amazing things, was really, really inspirational for me. And I really needed that, I think, this year, seeing so much stuff in the media. I think that a lot of us did. And this book really helped me kind of rethink what I was feeling like this year. And instead of feeling hopeless, I feel very hopeful.
Hi, I'm Christian Zilovitz. I'm a trans man. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm 53 years old, and I started this particular part of my journey when I was 36 or 32-ish, if I look back more. And when I came out the first time, I was living in Seattle, and I was teaching, and this was like 1997. And I knew the moment I came out that to keep my mouth shut, that it was don't ask, don't tell as an educator, even in Seattle. And then, you fast forward, it's 2023, and I'm working at the Weber School in Sandy Springs, which is a Jewish high school. And I worked also in DeKalb County before this, and I worked at the Globe, Globe Academy, which was a charter, as an out trans man. And I was told that I was needed for my out rainbow trans flag self. And that is pretty awesome, to not fear for my job by participating in this project. Because, when One Teacher in 10 came out from Kevin Jennings, who founded GLSEN, those people were few and far between. And now you can find lots of trans educators all around the nation, even right here in Atlanta, who are walking the walk and trying to make their place. And I'm grateful, as part of this project. I got to be part of this project because of Pride School Atlanta, which I founded back in 2014, thanks to folks at Charis too. They were the first people I was told to come talk to. So it's beautiful to be sitting here today and know that this project is for eternity. Because I remember the first book, The Love Makes a Family. I remember finding that when I first came out. And to know that it's still around today, and this book is, and my kids, I have 2 kids, they're not here tonight, and they'll be grown for many years when this book is still around. So I think it's pretty awesome. And I will sign your book.
Ooh, check. Hi, Taylor Alexander, pronouns they, them, she, her. I think 2 major things just stuck out to me about being a part of this project, a part of this book. I still think that it's very rare to see trans and non-binary stories told authentically from trans and non-binary people, and not filtered through a cisgender understanding or explaining of our experiences. Is very authentic, and it comes directly from us. And it is 2023, but it still feels very rare to find that. But also what stuck out to me was the concept of chosen family. I think a lot of us spend a lot of our lives seeking approval or understanding from those who we are connected to via blood or via relation. And chosen family is so sacred, especially when you have other chosen family members who are trans and non-binary. You're navigating this existence together, and it's a very beautiful experience. And so I just reading people's stories and where they come from and how they found themselves and how they found each other has been very just like beautiful, because I see it a lot as like a drag entertainer. Everybody's in some kind of chosen family. But to see it, manifested in so many different ways is also very beautiful.
Hi, my name is Noelle Heatherland. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm non-binary, genderqueer. And I think one of the most surprising things for me, or most impactful, was getting to tell my story, which to me, there's certain parts of it that often feels like not even possible to put in a book, but to have people be willing to say, hey, there's some really uh, uncomfortable parts of your story, but we can see where you've come from and where you are now, and it's worth sharing. And that to me was really impactful. My story is actually the last one in the book. So if you have the book, it's the very final one. And one of the things that to me I found interesting or serendipitous, if you will, is that the documentary called Shiny Happy People came out on Amazon Prime around the same time that we've been doing some book launches and celebrating this book. And the Shiny Happy People cult is actually a cult that I was raised in. And to now be able to look back and say, you know, I am a non-binary genderqueer person. I don't have my family of origin, but my chosen family can be celebrated just as equally as anyone else's family was extremely empowering.
And that actually, since both Taylor and Noelle brought this up, I wanted to ask y'all about, this question of your families and how you thought, and I'm curious whether Peggy, who's the editor, or how the idea of including your families was presented to you. Was it an open invitation? Was it a evolving conversation? When the opportunity to participate in the book was presented to you, was it, and you can include your families, or was it always a like, and we want you to include your family, whatever that looks like, and tell us about the inclusion? So we'll start down there. Yeah.
I first heard from Rain, the photographer, and it was presented to me as the project is about non-binary and gender non-conforming people or gender expansive people and their families. But I knew just instantaneously that it wasn't going to include my parents, since I'm like low key on the adoption block. They deny it when I ask about it, but I always see my sister hanging out with them. She doesn't even live in the state, on Instagram, and they're like 2 hours away. I'm like, yeah, you've disowned me. But I was really excited that I could even present like my smaller family, my chosen person.
I started this process with Peggy almost 2+ years ago. I want to say, I think maybe I reached out to y'all too, didn't I? Or connected y'all to Peggy. There's about 4 people in this book that I think are chosen family for me. Ben Hassine is one of them. Rimi Anjali. I mean, these people on stage are close friends. Although I'm just meeting you. Everybody to my left, I've worked with in community for years. So for me, when it was presented initially, I think it kind of came about during that photography time, I think I want to say too, where they're like, well, do you have people that you want to take photos with and from your family? Oddly enough, when I started this for me, I am 42 years old, so don't let the hair dye fool you. I transitioned when I was 19, and I lost the vast majority of my extended family, like 45+ members of my family here in the Atlanta area. My immediate family, my mom, my dad, my brothers, kind of all stopped talking to me. So going through all of that, coming to a period where it's kind of full circle when we talk about like a lot of the trauma in the books and when we talk about it, but the joy that does come out of it is even my mom considered taking a picture here with me for this book, and I wish she could have, but there's some cultural stuff and other things like that, but she was very proud of me. And I have my brother and my sister-in-law who married into our family, a very devout Muslim woman who was born in India, who, was like, I would love to, there is at the end, be in the photo with you, and we're so proud of you. So I think that for me, it's really amazing. And as Taylor was saying, chosen family is such an important part. I don't think that I could have gotten through the 20 years of going through those processes without having had people that I loved and that I was close to support me in the way that I needed. So I truly believe, that water is thicker than blood in some cases. And I have a lot of lovely people in my life who support me, but I'm also very proud that my family has been able to come to a point where they are full circle, come back around and learning and understanding. It's always a process, but it's nice to see how far they've come along.
Awesome. Again, I'm Christian, he, him. This lovely person behind the camera, as I'm looking at the email, is Robin Rain, who stepped into my life when we were starting Pride School Atlanta and said, I'd love to document your journey. And we have become family. And you talk about chosen family. Robin has photographed my family since my kids were like 2 and 5. And we have these most beautiful family portraits. And the visit, it's because they're intimate, you know, and the pictures that we got from this photo shoot that was specifically for this book were just gorgeous as well. And we had experience with major media and local media, and, you know, curious people want to know, and what was your name before, and show me the pictures before. And there was none of that in the, you know, in the request for this book. It was, we hope that people will be able to learn in this pioneering voices, so to speak, whatever the working title was, learn from your experiences as trans and non-binary adults and those whom you call family. And putting my family out there is challenging for me because I'm very protective of my children. My wife is even more so, the fierce femme redhead that she is. And don't mess with my kids. And we've had enough experiences of that, of other people, media people messing with my children or other people's children. And knowing that this came from family, like Peggy Gillespie is practically family, and Robin is family to me. And if Robin's involved in a project, I want to be involved in it. And Robin is a career photojournalist and a consummate professional. And I always treasure, and I know Robin treasures the time too, when we ever get to meet and just talk and just be. And one of the joys of this book is that we were asked to just be and tell whatever part of our stories we wanted to tell. And yes, there were questions that were posed like a good interviewer, but it's very healing to be asked to be a part of this. And yes, and so it's very interesting to think about how were we asked them. I was looking at my phone to think, like, look back at the email that said, like, this is the project we're doing. I was like, wow, this sounds really cool. And of course, my wife's like, be careful. Before you sign me up for something, let's make sure this is something we want to do. And one of the biggest things I've learned through this is family first. And that's the one thing I will share with you, is that if you are going to be involved in a project, know that your family comes first. You come first and your family. And then everything else is gravy. If it feels right, talk to somebody before you get involved in a project, because your images and your stories are forever once they're out there. Forever. They don't go away from the internet, even if you think they've gone away. My previous self, Christine Nancy Zilovitz Whitmarsh, lives with me, even though that person hasn't existed since 2000, whatever, since, 2006. But that person still exists, according to some people who send me junk mail. So it's kind of weird. But in all seriousness, if you can trust this, reach out to one of us. If somebody wants you to be involved in a project, because we can help you. ER and Sarah, of course, they're connected with all kinds of writers too. And Robin, of course, we can connect you with well-meaning people who are doing great work, who, when you're ready to share any part of your story, you choose every little bit, and you can always opt out at any point. So I don't know if that came up, but it's important.
Yeah, I think thinking back, I think I was initially connected to the project through Feroza, like many good connections. If somebody says I was referred to you by Feroza, I'm like, okay, the answer is yes, I'm going to do it. But I was, but that was the connection, and that's when I was looped into emails with Robin and Peggy. And I think once it was mentioned about like chosen family or drag families or like ballroom houses or whatnot, I was like, well, I'm the mother of a house. And so that kind of conversation just led to more discussion, and it really gave me a moment to consider like my drag family, my drag house, but also like my physical house, which at the time that we took those photos, that was less than a year that I was in my home that I had just bought in 2020, thanks to Feroza, who was my real estate agent. And so, yes, round of applause for Feroza. But taking those photos with my drag sister in my new little drag studio basement, documenting this story about authentic trans narratives, largely around family, was like really transformative because it was a very turbulent time for everybody. Obviously, the beginning of the pandemic made us all question how we move through the world, who we call, when we need something, who we call family. And to have a space to talk about these amazing people in my drag family who keep me steady in this world that's constantly shifting and often chaotic, and being part of this larger project where we're all like detailing the intimate, aspects of family, especially as trans people. I think just looking back at it, it's just like very, very special. And so like all the pieces just lined up, and it never felt, what's the word I'm looking for? It never felt intrusive. It always felt like, tell me about X, Y, Z. And it was never like prodding or trying to like dig up some kind of trauma that often comes with, talking about being trans. So it just felt very natural. And it was also like a very transformative space to just examine my own relationship to family and what it looks like. So, yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, my last name is Heatherland. And when I started my journey and realizing, I'm genderqueer and wanting to change my name, I knew for me, I didn't want to just change my first name. I also wanted to change my last name, but I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. Unfortunately for me, I've had a journey of having some tough lessons, and one of those being that not all trans and queer people are safe. And that's an interesting thing to say, maybe especially in a setting like this, but trans and queer people are humans. And so because we are humans, that means that we are imperfect and we have our flaws, and some of us have more flaws than others. And so with that being said, shortly before I was in the book, I actually was going through getting out of domestic violence with another trans person. And that is, kind of one of the dark sides of my story. But if you look at the beginning page of my story, it says Heatherland, Heatherly, Park, and Landis. Park actually is the last name of my girlfriend at the time. We currently are on a break. She is not the person that was involved in the domestic violence, just to be clear. She is a wonderful human being. And what I really love about the fact that she's featured in the book alongside me and her last name is listed there is we have decided like we'll always be chosen family no matter what. And I think that is the beautiful thing about trans and queer circles is sometimes you're dating people, sometimes you're meeting people, whether they're partners or friends. You can really choose how you keep those people in your life if they're good people. And so I'm really thankful for her. She's working tonight or she would have been here. Also, Samuel Landis is one of my other very close chosen family. They were also supposed to be sitting up here tonight, but they are stuck in New York City after being up there for Pride with all the New York City flight situations. So, but anyway, there was Sam Landis, and there was also a person named Jarrett Heatherly, who is not part of the trans community, but is a wonderful queer man here in Atlanta. And both of those people are so near and dear to me. And in my hardest moments, they were there, they were showing up, they were helping me deal with so many things. And I thought, you know what? while I'm changing my first name, I'm going to change my last name. And I asked them, I went to both of them and I said, hey, I want to make the last name Heatherly and Landis into Heatherland. And that name is going to be from both of your names. Is that okay? And that is how I got my name, is by just recognizing that they are people that are in my life forever and do so much good for me and with me. And I hope I do the same for them. And being able to celebrate that aspect of family, as soon as I heard it was a project involving family, they were the first people that came to mind for me, because they are literally people that I'm not blood related to, I'm not dating, I'll probably never be married to, and yet we share a last name, all because we've chosen to do that together. So that for me is part of just finding those people and celebrating those people that are family for you no matter what.
Thank you. So we have folks watching online from literally around the world. But of course, everybody who is here lives in Georgia. And y'all know that on July 1st, in just 2 days, a really unjust and transphobic law is coming into effect in Georgia that all of us, most of us, were actively fighting against, that is going to inhibit young people's access to, just good health care, basically. And so I have been thinking a lot. I'm 41, and thinking a lot about what it means for those of us who are trans, who came of age in a time, or even at queer, who came of age at a time where we were outlaws, right? Where we had no expectation of gay marriage, for example, or had no expectation that transness would ever be normal or legal in any kind of sense, and how our experience may be different than young people who are 13, 14, 15 today, who have had an experience of a certain trajectory of progress. And we have some young folks in the room with us tonight, but to me, it's very heartbreaking to see young folks with that experience, as opposed to my more jaded experience where I'm like, well, I never thought we were going to be legal, so here we are, So I'm wondering if y'all could, each of you is an activist in your own way. You all have lanes of activism that are, tangential to being trans or gender expansive, right? So could you talk a little bit about how you think about this moment of possibility for young trans people, this moment of activism for all of us? To me, it's a deep time of reflection because we have this law coming into effect in Georgia. But what do you want young people to know, or kind of what's roaming around in your head for young folks right now? Yeah.
As you're saying that, I can feel the physical experience of heartbreak in my chest, because I'm 41 also, so we're super jaded. We're not quite as jaded as the generation before us, but we didn't expect to be visible or to be included. And there's something that's beautiful about youth, is that you generally are so optimistic, and to see people have their first experiences with how unfair the world actually is heartbreaking. And I've had some folks reach out to me. It's usually more college age people, asking what do I do with all of these feelings, and what do I do with this distress? And even the fact that, similar to the Green Book that we had before I was born, for African Americans that wanted to travel safely, the HRC has essentially had to release the equivalent, because you really have to think carefully, where can I safely live? Where can I avoid incarceration for simply being myself? So it is extremely stressful. But what I've been reminding people of is that we don't need permission to exist. We never have. You don't need that. And that even when people are being oppressed, and it happens to folks all over the world, you don't stop living. You learn to hold the grief at the same time that you experience joy. I mean, even during the civil rights movement, people weren't crying every single day. That's just not sustainable, but it is a learning process. How do you hold the grief? I recently attended a workshop that honestly, it blew my mind. I'd never heard anyone explain grief in this way, that a lot of trans folks and queer folks, we're experiencing grief that's constantly being invalidated. And grief is what you experience when something is taken away from you, something or someone without your permission. And what a lot of us have lost is a sense of safety. And that does require grief. And we know that that isn't something that just goes away. And so you may notice it popping up in all areas of your life, and your bandwidth may be down to nothing. And depending on who you're surrounded by, people aren't going to hold space for that. So now more than ever, I think it's important to seek out the company of other folks with similar lived experience who can hold space for that grief, and they know exactly what it is.
I would say to the youth looking at this panel or in the room to look at this panel and see how we've survived all the different things that we've been through. And you have doctors and teachers and activists and organizers all sitting on. I'm a multi-million-dollar producing real estate broker. If you had asked me when I was 14 if I would live to see college, I think that at that time everything felt so overwhelming. So what I would say to kids is we often have experiences when we're younger, and it might not just be about gender. It could be about dating, it could be about school, it could be about friendships, family, so many things that seem so overwhelming. But just remember that all of that does come to an end, and you grow out of it and you grow from it, and things keep getting better. And overwhelmingly, what I would say when it comes to our experiences, a lot of the people sitting on this panel are a little bit older, but often in our communities, it's a misconception that like young kids have it easier now than when we did, because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have access to knowledge. But I have worked with PFLAG and done children's moderating kids groups. I think Noel's done that too. And I see the same amount of kids that are struggling with suicidal stuff or harm or self-harm or feeling, othered. And it's crazy because where a lot of the hate that I think we knew existed but was kind of sheltered is now just out on a face front now. And it seems so much more overwhelming for kids. And I think even for adults. As a TGX person myself, being 42, sometimes when I have to turn off the news, I have to get off social media or Instagram or Facebook, because sometimes I look at these things and it feels like the world's going to end. But it's not, guys. The bans that are starting to go through are now being reversed in federal court now. Arkansas just did it. 5 other states have already pushed back. It's illegal. Before any period of major growth, and when we see a progression, if we look back at the history of the United States, remember that, before women's rights, they tried to oppress women. Before racial justice, Jim Crow laws, before there's always this regressive pushback from the people who don't want change. And it's people like you in this room, people who are watching, activists, and the people who are true, authentic selves and speak up that make this change going through, right? So we don't give up. We just keep fighting. We fight a little bit harder. And as you can see in this moment, we're already starting to shift and win again, right? Sometimes we take a couple steps back, but we will always be moving this needle forward.
Number one, I'd say you need never be alone with your problems unless you choose to. You are not alone. And as opposed to the you are not alone, we are here. We are everywhere. I've been walking among you. You don't know who I am. Now I'm read as a gay man, which of course one of the guys who helped us raise money said, should I tell Heather her husband is gay? Now, I queer it up because I watched In Living Color, because that's how old I am. Hated it. See? And I learned this in 12-step rooms, which is where I transitioned among women who loved me in a very special way, mostly women. And they were my moms who raised me, my other moms, along with my godmother. And when my mom had a hard time, it took her time. And she said, I didn't know what to tell people. I said, Ma, I'm growing a beard and my voice is changing. And we laughed. And that aspect of this is what I wanted to share with you. We come together to laugh about the things we used to cry about alone. And we have to, because those people out there who are trolling to make nasty comments are insane in the worst way. And I don't use that term lightly, being someone who deals with clinical mental health issues myself. But if all the time you have is to hop on the NEA website, Facebook page, when somebody says, how do you make your classroom inclusive? Somebody says, I don't. Or you shouldn't. That's some random person who has nothing better to do with their time except troll pages that have nothing to do with them. And that third thing is don't read the comments. Don't read the comments. So when all the comments come up after this event tonight, don't read the comments. That's for all of us who are involved in this project. Anytime, don't read the comments. Have a friend who's detached. Look for the good comments that you should see and have them share that with you, because we need to guard ourselves. And Tim M. West, who is a fabulous Black gay man activist, now head of the LGBT for Civil and Human Rights, and he's the head of Teach for America's PRISM division. He said, look, activists, when I started working on Pride School, he said, activists need to exercise extreme self-care. And that's what you all are. You showed up tonight, wherever you are. But we showed up tonight, and we're in this book, and we're activists forever. And that's why, and a lot of times we're just walking among you. And sometimes the biggest activist act you can make to shut down the narrative that somehow we're like freaks and evil is just to go to school, go to work, drive your car, go to the grocery store, go to the grocery store, go to the grocery store. Check out books at the library. Go to the doctor. Tell the doctor your child's pronouns and make them honor them. Tell them their name that they choose to use and make them honor them. Call the doctor for other people so that they can suss out whether this doctor is trans friendly. And to get through these things, check out Queer Med right here in Decatur, Georgia. Strictly trans focused. Find those providers, talk to other people to get through all this. And like you said, they'll come for us. They'll come for when gay marriage passed, they went after the trans people. We're a smaller minority. So we're an easier target. But we keep moving. So and I'm very protective of my children, and I don't want them to know, my 11-year-old, I don't want her to know what's going on in the world. And so just for today, I do filter her news. She hears enough, but she is around, our happy rainbow family. And that's what's important, and so, enough out of me.
Our existence is a form of resistance, as Kristen was saying.
Period.
Say that on the mic.
Our existence is a form of resistance. By being who you are changing the world. Just being who you are. And that's what's so amazing about the TGX community. is when you look at our diversity and our beauty and you read these stories. These people might not be activists. These people might not be with organizations, but just their existence is a form of resistance. And the best thing, sometimes you don't have to be out and doing that visibly. For 20 years almost, I was under, I was in anonymity. My ex-in-laws for 13 years did not know I was a trans woman. And that was okay because that's what I needed at that point in my life. But you don't have to be out to be visible and change the world. Just being who you are is enough. You can be out. You can be in so many different spaces. But yes, our existence is a form of resistance.
I think just harmonizing right now. As a millennial, I'm 30. I see a lot of other younger millennials and Gen Z folks. I feel like they're caught in this like tug and pull of progression. Now you're able to turn on Netflix or turn on TV or log on to social media and just see trans and non-binary people living their lives authentically. But then on the same hand, you also see the powers that be, the people who we're supposed to look up to for leadership, telling you that you don't deserve to exist or identify the way that you do. And so it's weird to be like, we have this like, certain amount of progression and visibility, but we also still have this negative feedback that's telling us that we don't need to exist. I think that is a unique experience that maybe people my age and older didn't experience because we didn't have that kind of level of visibility or representation. It was always just like, we never expected to be this visible. We never expected to, to be seen on TV or be on the cover of magazines or be like a mainstream kind of topic of discourse. So I do think that it's a unique struggle that Gen Z and the younger generation is facing. I will say what was helpful for me moving from a rural country town where there was like zero representation at all to Atlanta, which is like queer mecca of the South, in 2011 was like reading up and learning your history. Like we have a history of resistance, a history of existing. And honestly, it was a lot of the elders in the community who showed me that living this life and understanding who I am and being in this identity was possible. It was people like Miss Cheryl Courtney Evans. It was people like Dee Dee Chambly, who is also in this book. It was people like the late Regina Boom Boom Sims, who taught me that you can be a Black trans femme and also a Black drag queen and honor those two identities at the same time. Sometimes it's finding an elder and listening to them because they will just give it to you straight and they'll be like, back in my day, this never existed. And it may be kind of eye roll, but it definitely gives you an understanding of like our community's history and that we've always had to fight. It's exhausting. We've always had to fight, but we also have rested and taken care of each other and had moments of just like internal community care. But we're not going anywhere and they're going to have to change. Not us, them. They will have to change. And I know some of them hate being called them, but they will have to change.
So I am on the board for Georgia Equality, and I also am in social work. And I think one of the things that I just want to, and I think it's been stated earlier, just reiterate that there are grants available for people who need them. And I just want to make sure that word is definitely being heard, that if you need that, please reach out to, Charis, reach out to one of us, reach out to Georgia Equality, because there is financing available for those who qualify and need that support. We want you to have that. Also, the existence and the resilience and how far we've come and all of this is beautiful and wonderful, and I'm so grateful for it. But I just want to emphasize the rest part and the joy part, which is, I think, a big part of this book, is that even though we do need to fight and even though our human rights, we have to make sure we're staying vigilant about those, that I've been trying lately to ask myself, like, where is the joy in my life? And like, how can I bring more peace and happiness into my life? And that's especially true if you're a young person, like if you're a child, if you're a trans child, if you're a genderqueer child, if you have one in your family, like just be a kid, be a person. You know, the things Christian listed off, like go to the grocery store, go to the doctor, hang out with your friends, like find the fun things. Not that going to the doctor is fun, but it's important. And I think too, like take care of yourself, and with the self-care, like definitely make sure that you know, during this time of fighting and of being aware of some of the fights going on, you know, I'm a person that has neurodifferences. I have complex PTSD along with some other neurodivergent disorders, or however you want to call it. And I think that making sure that whatever you have in your life that may make it challenging for you to find peace, for you to feel joy, make sure that you're getting care for those specific things as well, so that you can navigate the harder times and make it through to the other side. Because we are all, you know, here together. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to come tonight, is to see all of you and see my friends up here, because that is part of remembering the joy.
Thank you all so much for your collective wisdom. I feel like everybody who just got to hear that just got a whole education in a lovely way. Before we're going to transition into a signing, but before we do that, I wanted to give our folks who are here in the house and online the opportunity to ask a question or two. If anybody after listening has a question, and if not, that's okay. We can get right to the meet and greet. But if anybody has a question. Well, because I'm a bookseller, I'm going to ask my question, which is there a book or, you know, Taylor, you mentioned sort of the difference between our cultural power and our political power, right? But obviously at Charis, we believe that cultural power moves political power. Like, so is there a book or a piece of media that helped inspire you to realize what was possible in your life?
The first thing that comes to mind is The Body Is Not an Apology, because someone mentioned this today in a training, that it feels like there's a war on almost all bodies. And understanding that that's not okay, and looking at all the ways in which rejecting the body has been normalized, and how we can reclaim joy and actually feel like we belong in our bodies. Because when you can't feel anything, maybe in response to trauma, you've numbed a little bit, you're also not as sensitive to joy and to pleasure, which isn't fair to us. And that book triggered that discovery for me.
Hey, I'm actually Googling. So I can't think of anything specific from my youth, but what I think really had an interesting impact on me as an adult is Laverne Cox's Disclosure. I don't know if you guys have seen that documentary about how TGX folk have been represented throughout history. And it really made me kind of look back at my life and like where a lot of my own self-hatred, my lack of self-worth, my, what I even thought about TGX people, trans people, what people could be, what they couldn't be, was all shaped by media and books and everything, but not from loving, caring, affirming places like Charis, but what I was exposed to in my youth. And I think that for me, as an adult, it was really like a huge kind of part of healing, and then going back and really seeing how that experience changed my life. Because when I think about being like South Asian and growing up watching, Indian films and things like that, trans women were not depicted in beautiful ways or powerful ways. And historically, if you look back to pre-colonization by the British, trans people in hijras were like the third gender, were revered in India for generations. But it was really only during that time that kind of shifted. And that it's really crazy when you kind of go back and you think about, why did I hate myself so much growing up? Or why did I not think I could be more or better? Was not because I was doing that, was because of what was being fed to me. So I definitely think that, opening your minds up, reading books like this and seeing beautiful, powerful stories of TGX folks and joy definitely can shift how you feel about people moving forward and yourself.
The first book that came to mind for me was Becoming a Visible Man by Jameson Green. He was at one point, not too long ago, the head of WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and he was the first trans person to head up the world organization. But he's also a great writer and a really cool guy. And so his personal story was kind of very vanilla, if you will. And I'm a boring suburban trans guy from suburban New Jersey. And reading his story, there was a moment where he said, I had just started testosterone a few weeks before, and I'm walking through the office, and I stopped. And I just turned my head, and I must have looked like I forgot something. And I realized this is what normal feels like. And that moment of reading that, I was like, I was missing a hormone balance all my life, and it was the testosterone. And I finally started to feel in my skin. And to have his words to thank for that were really important. Another book was my gender workbook by Kate Bornstein. There's even a newer version of it. How do you know you're a boy? How do you know you're a girl? Just that question alone is great to ask other people. And Kate Bornstein is a gender warrior, and Kate Bornstein has another book called what is it? 101 Reasons Not to Commit Suicide for Freaks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? It's a little black book. I highly recommend it. The gender workbook, you know, if you're younger, if you have a younger person, preview parts of it, share some parts with the child. But there are books that are geared at kids as well. And I will also say to you that there's a new book out that just came out 2 days ago by Aiden Key, who is my big trans brother. He was the first one to call me he, out in Seattle. He created Gender Diversity, and I share that because I can't believe his book is coming out now. It's Trans Children in Schools. There you go. Pick it up. And if you need something, reach out to Aiden Key, and he can connect you to tons of organizations. He does trainings all around the country. And like Ben, which I noticed in reading his story tonight, he is also an identical twin. His twin sister Brenda, he transitioned, and there's a lot of us who have identical twins, which is really flipping cool if you ask me. But those books especially, I think, were really helpful to me. And stuff by Bear Bergman, including Butch is a Noun. That was really helpful for my wife. Butch is a Noun. And then his other book after that, The Nearest Exit May Be Behind You. And it's a series of essays. And he also created Flamingo Rampant Press of kids books. And so if you haven't checked them out yet, they're Canadian, but you know, we read them in America too. So yeah, those are awesome books.
Can I add one book? I'm sorry. I know I told you about media, but Redefining Realness by Janet Mock. Oh my God. Like, I have never read a book that had so many parallels for me as someone who had passing privilege. She came out later in her life. She tore the world apart. I mean, you know, she's the producer for Pose and all these other shows now and things like that. But an amazing book, very well written, easy read.
I'm going to be the multimedia person on the panel because I love books, but I've not read in a very long time. I read people, not books. But I mean, when I first came to Atlanta and I was going to GSU, I took a lot of like sociology, LGBTQ study classes. So some of the books that really just gave me the understanding of trans identity and whatnot were so important. There's this one book, I'm not sure if I can say the title, but it's like, Why Are F Words So Afraid of F Words? You know, got to keep it PG-13. But that was really informative. But also, I would say drag. Drag utterly saved my life and gave me a space to see myself. I know that often there's a kind of contention between drag and the trans community, but investigate it and lean into it, because once you know more about drag, you'll realize the majority of drag performers are trans and non-binary. I think the narrative in media and in popular culture has always been like it's cisgender men impersonating women, but honestly, it's mostly like trans femmes just being beautiful and trans mass folks just being really hot. So look into that. I would say I'm a big fan of music, and music that saved me, that really gave me kind of like language or a space to feel seen as a trans person. There's this musician, she's no longer with us, but her name was Sophie. And so she was a producer, and just has like amazing work that is all about really like being trans and being everything, but also nothing, but also like having the space to create yourself. And I think it's a very important part of being trans, is not having like a definition or a kind of like box to put yourself in. You get to create your own existence and identity. And yeah, that's what I would say. So
I actually have a book recommendation for younger children, and then I'll give my adult recommendation. The book for kids is called "It Feels Good to Be Yourself," a book about gender identity. It's written by Teresa Thorne, and it's a great book for all ages. And the illustrations are just so cute, and it really does a great job of explaining, sharing options, telling kids all the different possibilities of how it is to be human, right? Just kind of, I think that would have been so life-saving for me to know at a much younger age what was possible, right? Like I was only given one template. I didn't even know that other options existed, and that made my journey like so much harder and less fun. So that book is really a must if you have kids in your family or work with kids. But for adults, I would echo "The Body Is Not an Apology," which I actually bought at Charis one day when I was having kind of a tough time. I came here and left with about 10 books, and that was one of them. That's by Sonia Renee Taylor, I believe. And also another book, Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Mary Brown. They actually now are non-binary, genderqueer. I don't think they were when they wrote that book or at the beginning of their author journey, but now they're part of the trans community, and they wrote an awesome book about embracing joy, and I think that one coincides really well with our stories in this book.
All excellent recommendations. I think almost all of those are on the shelves right now at Charis, so certainly they're all orderable. So I think folks would be in good hands with any of those books. So I hope that folks will check those out. We do have one more question from our online audience that I think is a really great one. So this is from Rabbi Michael Rothbaum from Congregation Bet Haverim here in Atlanta. It is a synagogue that was founded by and celebrates queer folks. And Rabbi Michael asks, can the panelists talk about the role of religion and spirituality in their journeys?
And I also had another writer I wanted to mention that I forgot. Alok, anything by Alok. A-L-O-K. Am I missing any letters? Just, they're a genius. Like every word that comes out of their mouth is like poetry, so affirming. And they had an amazing interview with Laverne Cox on Laverne's podcast. And it'll just, I just love them. But the connection between religion and our experience, I just find a tremendous amount of religious trauma in the queer community in general. And I actually just a couple of weekends ago virtually attended a religious pride event, and something they mentioned, Ganesh Space put this event on, and that's a queer-centered mindfulness organization based in New York. They had a trans rabbi there, a cis gay Black man who is a preacher, and a South Asian non-binary person. And it was just amazing to hear them explain how in their own traditions, when they really look back, there are trans people there. And it is a more recent phenomenon that folks have been erased from their own traditions, just like you said about the Hijira And also, there's a lot in the Torah that's giving gender nonconformity, and it's just been suppressed. So I found it really helpful to hear from people who are deeper in their wisdom traditions, because I spent a tremendous amount of time having toxic experiences in Christianity, but I still feel like I really couldn't show anyone how to bring Christianity into their present tense if that feels good for them. But for me personally, I've just had to move away from it because I had such a bad time with it, and look at other forms of spirituality that feel more affirming, not just for my queerness or my transness, but also for my Blackness. Because as much as a lot of Black folks love Christianity, it hasn't always been a safe place to land. I'll just leave it at that.
Ooh, this is a question. So earlier we were saying our existence is a form of resistance, but often when I go out to speak, and I have to be very careful of speaking about Islam because I'm Muslim, and then I always get death threats and stuff after. So, and this is on the internet, but hi, here we go again. Okay, great. It's fine. They always find me. I really believe that when you look at every major monotheistic religion, you know, we Christianity, Islam, Judaism, I mean, you name it, we're often having to choose between our existence or our religion. Hence why we see so many suicide attempts and self-harm. Often it's not just our families, but growing up in LGBTQ families or in conservative backgrounds, we feel like we are sinners or something is wrong with us. And I think that, as you were just saying, a lot of our, thoughts about religion can be informed by what we've been, raised around. Growing up in a South Asian Muslim family, my sect of Islam is kind of like the Jehovah's Witnesses of Christianity, right? So we're very, very, very strict. And I had this, fear, and I thought God hated me, and I was just this horrible person, and I shouldn't exist. And as I've come to terms with my religion, and I've had a lot of growth to get to this space because I still identify as Muslim. What I don't identify with is a lot of the belief systems that are put in place by not just Islam, but any major religion, as far as who's speaking the loudest and what their interpretation of that religion is. When I look at religion, and again, any prophet, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Jesus Christ, Moses, when I look at the people and saints and people who are truly pious and religious, I often think they were most aligned with TGX people of color, people who have been marginalized. And when you look at the history, you look in these books and you read these stories, they weren't hanging out with rich, wealthy people, and they were in the streets, and they were feeding the poor and the unhoused, and hanging out with sex workers and people who were marginalized, and trans people and LGBTQ people. And I often think that, like, when I look at us as a community, we are the most godlike and the most beautiful expression of what a human being can be, because we go through so much trauma often in our lives that when you meet people like who's sitting here and out in the room, we really come from a place of true love and non-judgment, and there's no biases built in there anymore, from the sense that, right, you're really overwhelmingly tried to love. So to me, I would say that's my overall thing about religion. Secondly, there is in every major religion organizations that you can turn to who are supportive of the LGBTQ and TGX community. And I had no idea of this until literally 3 or 4 years ago, but Progressives for Muslim Values, for example, the rabbi who just asked us is part of a community in a synagogue here in the Atlanta area that is accepting of LGBTQ folks. There's a multitude of organizations that you can look up, but it can really kind of help you rethink what religion means to you in a sense, right? I never knew my own history of trans people in Islam going back and you know, hundreds of years and the stories that were present because I never heard those. And then I go to an organization that's very liberal and talks about these kinds of things. I was like, what Islam is this? I didn't see this. What are y'all talking about? Are y'all sure? And he was like a theologist, right? Who had like 25 years of doctorate in studying Islamic studies. He's like, oh yeah, trans people existed in Islam all the way back to, you know, the Prophet's time. And people did have surgery and castration. And I mean, just so many things that I was like, what? So these experiences can be really eye-opening. We have to kind of keep our minds open, read a lot of books, have different experiences with different folks. And if you guys need resources, everybody sitting on this panel or possibly in this room might have sources for one another. So if you guys need anything, let me know.
My experience is very different. I mentioned earlier about being in 12-step rooms, being surrounded by families and friends of alcoholics, etc. At age 26, I found a need in an alcoholic marriage to find some help somehow for what was going on in my life. And I stumbled across people who said, take what you like and leave the rest and find a God of your own understanding or a higher power of your own understanding or none at all. And we have no opinion on outside issues or who you are. So I've always gotten to be who I am around these friends who I've known now since I was 26. They've raised me. And I came up with a vision of my spirituality is not religion based. We occasionally attend an Episcopal church, which is somewhat affirming. But I don't trust organizations that have lots of people who are not necessarily, that there's not this real solid foundation of acceptance of whoever you darn well are. But my first vision of a higher power was the Kokopelli, God of abundance and fertility and mischief. And that's who I am. So, and at times it was like, okay, actually my first vision of a higher power was the far side God. So God making snakes, God at his computer. And that sense of humor is what saved me. And then it was the Kokopelli. And every now and then it's like, okay, this image of this God holding this little baby, that I needed somebody to carry me. And it sounds like really hokey stuff, but I have my only tattoo is a Kokopelli tattoo right here. It's 2 Kokopellis back to back. And so here, hold this. I will show the world because it's 2 Kokopellis with a rainbow through it. But now I look like a man with. I'll always be grateful for that tattoo. But people look, they're like, why do you have a rainbow butterfly on your leg? Loved it.
Ooh, religion. Before we talk about that, there was another piece of media that I think has been really, really great and instrumental for me, and it's really come out in the last 2 years. It's this TV show based out of Canada called Sort of. It is a show about a South Asian trans non-binary person navigating coming out, feeling like they're trans enough, but also not trans enough, dealing with their very religious parents, specifically their father, who's very strict, but their mother, who's also coming into her own identity independently as a person. It's super great. It's called Sort of. It's based out of I think Toronto. So check that out. I think as a Black person from the South, I was raised missionary Baptist. I never really felt it, but I knew my whole family was very into religion and God and whatnot. It has never stuck to me, maybe because of how somewhat cool my mom is. She was just as long as you're a good person, that's all that matters. And I was like, cool. So I'm not reading this book. But I think sometimes, at least in my experience, I feel like sometimes queer and trans people are so more well educated and well versed in religion and what it actually teaches than people who are consider themselves devout followers. because we spend so much of our lives being afraid that we're in direct opposition of this all power being, where we read every text, we do research, what does this actually mean, yada yada yada, and then you go and talk to people who are up in the pulpit every Sunday and they have really no idea what they're preaching. It's just all about emotion, not about the text or like the actual intention behind the religion. And so I think that's very comical, at least to me, where it's just like, you know, I'll go back to home to like family get-togethers and suddenly religion or LGBTQ identities comes into conversation. I'm like, y'all talking about me? And then I have to like go off and, well, actually in Leviticus it says this, and actually in Corinthians it says this, and actually this book was rewritten by like 2 rich white British people. So like this, why are we taking this so literally as, you know, Black people? I think what's so beautiful is that as much as trans and non-binary people are redefining gender and identity, we're also redefining in our own unique way spirituality and what we find ourselves seen in. I love that, like, you can talk to any other trans person and they'll be like, well, actually, you know, I believe in this goddess and nature. And I'm like, some people laugh at that. I'm like, that's beautiful. I think the ability to find home and find, you know, care and spirituality and things that move you, things that you believe in that isn't just like indoctrinated in you is such a beautiful concept. And I think that some cisgender people could benefit from redefining their own spirituality in a sense. So, yeah.
So for me, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the Institute for Basic Life Principles, also known as the Advanced Training Institute, under this guy named Bill Gothard, which is an offshoot of Christianity, if you want to call it that. Very twisted, very extreme, very fanatical, and is literally labeled as a cult by most people these days. So with that said, obviously religion is a very hot topic for me. I did learn from an early age that being who we are, being who I am, definitely was supposedly against that religion and supposedly against having faith in a Christian God or anything like that. However, as I've gotten older, I have had the privilege of being involved in the faith community, especially Christianity, as a queer person and as a trans person. I consider myself an ex-Christian these days, a former Christian, but I still know a lot of resources, and I'm always happy to share those. I would name Q Christian Fellowship as a great organization if you're wanting to be involved in an affirming space as a trans or queer person. That's a national or international org. They have annual conferences, and I've always had a positive experience with them. Also, a book I would highly recommend is anything by Kathy Baldock, the Canaan Walker Connections set of books, which basically she has dedicated her life to researching all the things like Taylor was mentioning, and made a book specifically for people to kind of see different ways things have been interpreted over the years, and also understanding historical context. There's also a documentary that just came out called 1946. I don't know if I'm in it, but I was a little bit involved with that project, and I highly recommend that as well if you're wanting to kind of explore Christianity and queerness. However, like I said, nowadays I pretty much, I don't know, I'm almost an atheist, which in the South, that's always like a scary thing to tell people. But I definitely am also like pagan in a way. So I'm just very open. And I did get invited to a Pride Shabbat service. So back to the rabbi's question, actually went to a Pride Shabbat service last week. And it was just beautiful. It was one of the first religious services I've been to in a long time. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to explore, faith in my own way. So I think that, I feel that religion is a huge reason why my birth parents or my family of origin have nothing to do with me, which is really sad. And I also feel like are so many opportunities. I would just add, I won't say the name, but there is a mega church in the Atlanta area that I was involved with for a while at the beginning of coming out as queer, and they seem very welcoming and affirming. But unfortunately, if you ask these two questions, this is how you can always find out the actual state of affairs is one, will they marry me to another person of the same gender or same sex based on paperwork, right? Based on maybe appearance and or paperwork. Will you marry a queer couple? And also, can a queer lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, whatever, can we be in leadership here, or are we just allowed to hold the doors open? And unfortunately, you don't find that out until much later. So a place that could have been a really good faith opportunity for me ended up just adding more trauma. So I think it's really important as a queer or trans person or a family with queer or trans kids that you're really mindful of, before it goes on too long, like asking the right questions and determining if the space is truly a place where you can grow and like do all the things like everyone else, because that's what we deserve.
Amen. Thank you all so much. We have already, I was like, oh, we'll just have a little cute few questions and then a meet and greet. Y'all have given such robust and beautiful answers. So thank you for your time and your generosity. I want to say goodbye to our folks who are watching virtually. Thank y'all so much for being with us. You can click this teal button at the bottom of the screen to buy Authentic Selves directly from Charis. It really does help us when you buy event books from us. The other thing that you can do that would really be great is to request that your public library carry Authentic Selves. You can also buy a copy and donate it to your college or high school alma mater's library. We have just as much right to put the books that we want into libraries as the right-wing fundamentalists who are trying to take books out of libraries. So don't be shy, get them in the libraries. And this would be a great one to promote, because more young people in particular need to see examples like this. So good night, y'all. Thank you for watching.